This is comes on. Hello, welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to Bridges Live Presents, and I'm talking to. I'll let my guest introduce himself, but I want to tell you how we met. We met on the March on Washington, but it wasn't. I want to. I've been saying this for about a week since the march. It was more than a march. It was about an opportunity. And what I mean by that is that we all have opportunities in our lives to do something or to hear something so we can do something. And there was times there at the march, I heard something and I read a lot, and then there was things I never heard before. And that's what Mr. Shawn Ironmaker is going to help us with today. This is about education. I think people learn things, but they're not truly educated. But before we get into that, Shawn, please introduce yourself and thank you for being on Bridges Live with me.
You're welcome. Hamidagiabi, Biagi, Wombrigit Yonga, Ani Nakon Yabshka Shahia, Anishinaabe. I told you in my native language, which is Nakota, that hello, my relatives, Hamidagiabi. Midagiabi is they call me, and then my name, my ceremonial name is Womni Gityanga, which means sits with eagle in our language, and then my colonized English name is Shawn Ironmaker. Yes, and I'm from the Ani and Nakota tribes in north central Montana.
So I lived 20 plus years in North Dakota. So I have been very familiar with the three tribes up there, just doing my thing, learning lessons, and making lots of love and good friends. And so the Dakota language is very similar to Nakota language.
Correct.
It's very similar in some of the pronunciations,
Yeah.
but still very different. So, and I really want to get into the things we don't talk about when it comes to the First Nation, like the First Nation of people that was here. I mean, you guys got eradicated. I mean, and we just never talked about. It's literally never talked about. We'll talk about everything else except for the eradication of the Native American. Why is that? And we know it's a policy. Okay, let's not get it twisted.
Right.
We know it's a white government policy. But even the white people who don't know, they become explicit with allowing it because they don't know. So we have to teach them to hopefully they can do something.
Right. No, and that's very, very true. My view of that, just in representation of all, I would say, the indigenous people of this continent.
Right.
We growing up, I was fortunate to understand, our customs for the tribes, and especially like in North Dakota, where you described, my dad, he was in law enforcement, and he served the Native communities, and we had lived in a little community called Mandaree, North Dakota.
I know it, and I know it well.
Yeah,
I know it well.
Grew up there, and so those strengths and roots of who we were, up until modern day, much of what we knew was taught in secret and private, and then even growing up in Mandaree, and then other reservations had lived on. It was all controlled through the mission services of the Jesuit mission people of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so my first view of what's wrong with America is that when you look at the doctrine of discovery, our people, a lot of times I'll have folks that are not one of us indigenous people. So like white people, Wasichus, we say Wasichu in order
Yes.
to mean not one of us. And so the Christian values of this continent are that it took the Christians to come here to save us from ourselves,
Right.
and then we're heathens and devils,
Yeah.
and so when you have to record the history for this country, or even like the two governments, the Canadian government
Right.
and the United States government, that story doesn't fit for them. So they we were here, and so in the doctrine of discovery, they discovered us, and so when we refer to ourselves as the people or the First Nation people, that story can't be told in either government because it doesn't fit within the Christian values. And so
here's the question that it must come up even within the community. Your community is, if it doesn't formulate in the Christian values, and that's okay, then why are they trying to hide it if they're supposed to be of Christian values? That doesn't seem like there's something jiving there.
yes, well, definitely from what would be a an assimilation and an assault of all of our nations. So, like my name right now, what we talked about is Ironmaker. That is not my family name, and so a little bit of history where before the state of Montana became a state, uh, after the Battle of the Little Bighorn,
Right.
for Western tribes, that is, the Andrew Jackson was president, and he initiated a policy called assimilation of the Indian tribes.
Well, he means eradication. That's
Yes.
what he meant. He didn't mean it.
Yes.
He called it assimilation. He was like,
Right.
let's just get rid of them.
Right. And so what's not in the history books is you have locations in North Dakota and Montana that were internment camps. And so starting with north central, you have Fort Assiniboine, where Havre, Montana now is, and then you had Fort Peck, where Glasgow, Montana is, and you had Fort Abraham Lincoln, where Williston, North Dakota are.
Yeah.
So they're all along the Great Northern Railroad. So when the second tranche of the 7th Cavalry came, their first priority was to round us up into these fenced-in areas, and then, like you just said, that eradication. They took all the children and separated them from their parents, put them on a train, just like the Nazis did with the Jewish people. Put them on a train, shipped them to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and so fourth generation ancestor of mine, he was there as a little boy, and when they got there, they shaved their hair and put him in a uniform and gave him a Christian name. I named him James, and then he worked in a blacksmith shop. So alas, his name's James Ironmaker. And it's sad because living on the East Coast here from Montana now, that has always been a reminder from elders and those before us that made sure we knew what was going on there, and for me to value today, because I'm his ancestor, and I'm still here, and but there's a lot of children that didn't make it, and there's been a lot of controversy with the town of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Even the U.S. Army, they don't want to claim that was an Indian boarding school, and you got photographs and everything else,
but they don't want to claim it.
No, and so even the graves that are there, they were a lot of unmarked graves, and they could identify maybe what tribe the children came from. So within the last couple of years, they erected a wall around the cemetery area, and then they started exhuming bodies and getting a hold of tribes to come and, they can claim their people.
So we know recently, when it comes to this education that's coming in with the newer teaching about the United States, and how do you feel about that? Because still, you're not being mentioned. It's only about, I understand it's about blacks, this, slavery, that, and other things that has not been done. But yet, the First Nation people are still not being mentioned. It's like, is it a deal? Is it a deal with the devil or something? Like, okay, if we get you over, you got to leave those people behind. It's like,
right. And uh, well, I've thought a lot about this as well, and I'm just trying to look at what history has not taught us, just like you just said. So when we look at periods of time as to our people as a whole, like even up through the early 1979 to 1983, practices of our language, speaking our language, showing our culture, like the dancing and the ceremonies and so forth, that was against the law. And so we did it in private, and so like sometimes folks will say, well, yeah, I went to, Indian celebration on one of the reservations. And I didn't think it was against the law, but it was. And so the changes that had occurred are so recent that much of the policies that surround the original treaties for each of the tribes, primarily like I'm going to say the uncivilized tribes. What I mean is nomadic tribes like
yes,
myself.
yeah,
Yes, so we have an ancestral area, but we don't have a claim to a village somewhere. But at any rate, our people on that level, we were still considered like wards of the government, so we're prisoners of war,
even to
and
this day.
even to this day.
And
Yeah,
that's something, again, people don't have no idea that this is still part of your ward of the government. I heard
right,
this when I was in South Dakota, and I almost lost my mind. I could not believe it. And that's why a lot of people stay on the reservation, because if you
right,
come off the reservation, you become ward of the government.
right,
On the
right.
reservation, you're sort of freer, for lack of a better term, but you're free.
Yes. Yep. And a lot of that didn't change, until the like I said, the late 70s going into the 80s. It the there was Public Law 638 that manages like allows tribes to be have their own sovereign immunity. So we can have our own government and our own constitution and our own rights to our people. So we're a nation within a nation.
Right.
And so and forgive me, I wish I knew it at the top of my head, but there is an order, like an executive order that exists. And so my first thought of kind of rambling what you said, like what's the problem? The problem is it takes a presidential administration to acknowledge that executive order. And so there was only one president, most recently from the 80s to now, which was President Obama.
Right.
And President Obama did that. He acknowledged it publicly, that I want to acknowledge this executive order for, the tribes of America, that honoring their treaties and
but did it do anything? He mentioned it, but it didn't
right.
do anything.
Well, what it did is it actually in the background started moving things forward when it comes to educational purposes. And so a lot of our people were, because we're wards of the government, there's not many public, they're actually I don't think there's any public schools on any Indian reservations. And so what had happened, for education is we would go to a Catholic mission or a Lutheran mission, and then when we hit maybe 8th grade and you would be moved to a boarding school. And so that we didn't have those educational choices.
Well, now they are, because
now they are.
Now they are.
Right.
So, and I do enjoy that, and I do enjoy, a lot of people still don't know, you can go to an Indian college for free, even if you're not a native. You can get there and get a good education.
Correct. And that's what reinforced that level of our I guess what would it be like, definitely the tribal colleges, and then creating a consortium of different tribes, to have an academic program that's federally recognized, or not necessarily federally, but like if you went to, a university system, the credits were transferable to that. So it was a legitimate academic plan.
I do have lots of friends who work in the different colleges in Bismarck, actually,
Right.
and they still say their degree, a lot of places in the United States are not accepting it.
Right.
And I was just like, okay, wait a minute. This is supposed to be a federal thing saying it, this is, legal and everything, but they're not accepting your degree of a master's or whatever you have because you got it from your tribal college. Now,
Right.
again, one of those, who writes these rules?
Right. Exactly. And so that brick wall definitely, I mean, for South Dakota, Montana, and North Dakota, it created a lot of immersion programs, through the tribal colleges for the local communities. And so we were able to establish an immersion school that taught the classes in our language.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that still exists. So this is what happened, with I guess maybe trying to move things forward. And then truthfully, as soon as the last administration with President Trump, one of the first executive orders he did was to remove the one that Obama set up. And so and his purpose for that was to he was looking at all of the trust lands on the
Yes.
reservations,
Yeah.
and he wanted to start a real estate deal.
That's
So
exactly that was the only reason. It had nothing to do
Right.
with Obama, and it had all to do with trust deals because it's
Yep. So I kind of feel that we just keep going backwards with dealing with the federal government, and then that I had the same conversation over the weekend. I had some folks that were that didn't know anything about about me. I'm around and from Montana, and they it's always the same questions. It's like we're like out of a Hollywood movie. Like you guys really exist, and then of course they we're always just referred to as the Indians
Yep.
or the Indians, and then and they'll say, well, so how did your one of the questions I had this weekend, I just had to chuckle at. There, they this lady's like, so do you ever go visit Asia? And I said, Asia, and she was. So the scientific version of how we got to the United States was that we came on a land bridge.
The Bering Strait.
Right.
Oh,
yeah. And so
okay.
and I had to laugh. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like she has no clue. So how many other people think that we're Asians and we live here, and it just gets confused. And so and then unless you went and paid for a higher level of learning, at a with an advanced Native American study, you're never going to learn this.
You know what? Some of the thing I tell you, and I always say this when it comes to learning, sit with the people.
Right.
Sit with the people. You can go to a classroom, and that's good. It really is. You can pick up a book and turn a page. Sit with the people. Sit with an elder, and listen.
Yes.
And don't say a word. Don't ask a question, because that's how I've been blessed to come back and listen and talk, and because when you really hear all of it, a lot of it becomes so soulful hurting.
Right.
Like it's hard not to weep. And then one of the elders said, don't weep, be stronger.
Right.
And I was just like, I'm because I'm just so pulled in this. It's like it feels like I'm being pulled into the earth and sucked up, like it just wants to explode. And it's not that. It wants you to absorb it so you can release it, so you can embrace it, so now you can move forward with it. It's the opposite feeling of what you call Western thought process of this is so sad. No, this is powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And that goes, even back to what we were just, I guess the question of is, why is there a lack of acknowledgement for who we are and what we were, and I truly feel that it has a lot to do with what would be the practices of eradication and genocide, and I can't help but observe different news stories. I try not to follow things that are on social media, but a lot of the boarding schools have closed, and then starting with Canada, they're starting to, they meaning the people of the community, the Native people, they have gone there and used some scientific research and found bodies. They found mass graves, and so that explains, to me, a lot of things. It's like, how did these people die? How did these children die? And why did they die? And why do our people don't know about that? So I feel it's going to start coming up. I think, more and more of the boarding schools in America. I promise you that there's probably the same scenario.
As we sit back and we put these little, and I've done this, put these index cards on, not the story, but the story of the African American coming in, the story of slavery, the story of the Spanish, the story of First Nation people, and what one segment of color of people have done to so many, to dismiss at the least and to eradicate at the most. I don't know how you would sleep at night. I don't know how I could sleep at night. I don't know how it could be a part of this.
Right.
Even in what they say, well, it's 2021, get over it. Okay.
Right.
Even being a part of 2021, knowing that I would not be sitting in a certain place, in a certain spot, having a certain ability, if it wasn't for the dismantle, the eradication, and the engagement of other cultures and people, just so I can be able to, wow. I don't know how,
Right.
And then to not do anything. Now, here's the thing. We do know when we're at certain places and speaking at certain things, there are certain people out there going, this needs to change.
Right.
But out of the 100-something million people, just because I see 10 of you, I don't know if that makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Very true. And there, I guess over the years, for coordination of different tribal nations and leaders coming together, organizations like maybe the National Congress of American Indian in Washington D.C. that will fill that gap between the government and the tribal relations, and it comes down to money, and so our people are struggling so much that of anything beyond just our normal day-to-day struggle for our elders and for our children, I unfortunately gets missed, and so I don't feel it can continue to get missed, especially you're spot on. It's like I hear that from anybody that wants to be empathetic, that what can I do? How do we change it? And it's like it begins all the way from just acknowledgement.
Yeah. How about speak it in your daily language? That's what it's not just acknowledgement like I know. Acknowledgement means to say it to another.
Right.
That's acknowledgement. It's not like, oh yeah, I knew that. Well, who have you told? No one. Well, that's not acknowledgement.
Yeah. Yep. And that's true. And so, like, okay, so this is great for you and I to have this discussion, and then it'll pique some others' interest. But if I were to return home, and I'm not exaggerating, any part of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, it's very racist.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and for me being a person of color, a brown person, there's some pretty horrific things, besides the easiest one would be, being called a savage. And so
still to this day.
Yes, to this day.
That's what I'm saying. This is not like this is like old stuff. This is still happening. Trust
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah. And there's many times, even recently, my youngest daughter lives in Bismarck, North Dakota. She works in law enforcement, and went to visit. We went to a restaurant.
Does she work up there at Fort Totten too?
No, she works in Bismarck.
Okay,
so
awesome.
She actually works for the Burleigh County Sheriff's Department.
Oh, okay.
but what's sickening to me, and I get so upset, and I try not to, but like, we went to this restaurant. It was kind of late, and not really late, but so we sat down for dinner, and we, nobody acknowledged us. And then finally a waitress came over and she said, you might want to leave. We're really busy. And we're the only brown people in there. So that's just the obvious. And so I did say something and make a scene, but still it's that, I mean, that's every day. That's a small part of every day.
There has been times when I was in White Shield, and literally there were trucks from outside of White Shield would come on to the area just so they can pick on a kid in White Shield, and I have stopped it because those trucks would leave because of the fishing area that was near there, coming across that bridge as you get ready to pass through Mandan and all the way over. I know people were talking about home stuff, and everyone's like, "Where's Mandan? What bridge? What's White Shield?" Stop it. It's okay. But people still have this privilege, like, oh, I can do anything I want because it's on their land, and once I come off, they can't do anything. Talk about that, because that is still a huge issue. We talk, and I'm big. What I'm saying is that one of my largest soapboxes that I work on is human trafficking, and the Native Americans have been human trafficked the most on this land, and no one ever thinks about them.
Yeah, and that's a fact. So every Indian reservation is a military compound, and so much like a military base, the boundaries of that. If you like, we're wards of the government, so like we have to be federally recognized and enrolled for our community, our tribe, and then living there, anything, we're controlled by federal law. So the federal, any federal police officer has jurisdiction over the people that live there. But like you just said, if somebody that wasn't from there and not an enrolled member of that tribe could come and commit a major crime, and then they would just be escorted to the brown, like kicked off the reservation. And so a lot of what occurs there is, so your first thing is that a reservation doesn't follow state law. It never will.
It never will.
Never will.
Never will.
And nope. And so the state and the federal government are like, the state and federal officers, they don't have joint, like, cross jurisdiction. They will never. So any state trooper can actually go through and enforce maybe traffic laws,
but nothing
on
else.
a reservation. Yes, but nothing else. And then a sheriff's deputy, any county police officer, and especially local. So you're always going to have, every reservation has a border town, that is white. And so at any rate, that's your first problem. So that exists from the federal government. So when you go into federal law enforcement and who, like, who's in charge of that, it would fall to the responsibility of the Interior Department.
Right.
And so the Interior Department would, if there was a major crime, beyond like the military. So like military, they would have a joint law enforcement that would investigate it, or lawyers and so forth. So anyway, the FBI then is that agency that would investigate a major crime. And so and
in these rural areas, people,
right,
when we talk about FBI, we're not talking about the things you see on TV. We're talking about one or two people that's got to cover thousands of miles, like one or two.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and exactly that. So even the reality of it, I'm glad you pointed it out that way. If like going from here to Montana, I can get to my reservation and I have patchy cell phone service, and it's never going to change. There's the very limited cell phone towers. landline service is kind of non-existent, and then very, very, very few internet connections. And so, given that, they're back to a two-way radio, they meaning law enforcement, and that's how they have to manage it. And then you don't have any tri-agencies, so like, the federal and the state and the county are not working together. And then you may have a situation where, to make it even worse, that maybe the tribal government there has established their own ability to run and manage law enforcement. So then the Interior Department doesn't need to, provide police protection. And so that would be the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Yes. So those federal officers, if they're not needed, then you get to like just I have a lot of respect for any levels of law enforcement, and it has to be a hard thing to do. So, when a tribe's managing that them managing that themselves, even simple things like running a background check, or like
it's impossible.
They have to call in, and figure out, if somebody's wanted or something, and they're not getting any cooperation. They're getting less cooperation than a federal officer would in that situation in a rural state that doesn't like you anyway.
Right.
And
do you ever think we'll have a First Nation as a president?
I feel we will. We're pretty close. Exciting to acknowledge Deb Haaland. Deb Haaland is now the first Interior Secretary, and Deputy Director. I mean, just all the props to her.
Right.
And so based on that, I feel we will. And when we get to that level, it's going to be on that next generation of change. I don't foresee anything maybe within the next 10 years or so. I think the first step here is making a change in the Interior Department. And, she's got 4 years to do it, and we're already halfway through one, and
and she's done some good work already.
Yes, that's exactly right. But all these things that we're talking about, maybe that's where there might be at least that little bit of change, that coordination, to address the dereliction of duty. That's the only thing I could say what it is.
I don't know. My pushback to that is I don't think it's a dereliction of duty. And here's why I would say that, because I don't feel those others don't feel it's their duty.
True. That's a good point.
I don't think they feel no obligation, no connection. Really, like we always talk about, feel it with your soul and connect with your love. This is business.
Right.
And they're like, if I don't get, something for my dollar, I wouldn't do it. And I'm like, well, life is more than business. Well, that's why you're broke and you're there and I'm here. And you know what I mean? Because that is the conversation. That's how they think. That's how they feel. And what I mean by they, and if people want to correct me when I say they, when you don't do anything to correct the systemic issues, you're part of they.
Right.
There's nowhere around hiding from it. If you want to be a part of something, whether you agree or disagree, then that's where you distinguish the difference. But when people do nothing, I have no problems with people who do something and I don't agree with it. I have a problem with people who do absolutely nothing. That really gets me like going sideways. I just don't understand how people just don't do nothing.
Right. Yep. And that's the truth. And quite honestly, and you've experienced it, Dr. Paul, where you get in some of the smaller communities like that, and sure you have what I described was, the racism, but sometimes you do have a community that will step up with you. So there's going to be some white folks that, they say, hey, enough's enough, or
right.
On that community level, there is some small connection.
Yes.
And then, how do you, plug in all the wires and make a spark there, and then that's your right, and so, from what you just said, a community level could make a huge impact, much like everything that we, did for George Floyd,
Yeah,
as
it
as
sure
as
could.
a nation, as a community, that's a type of empowerment that needs to occur, and then yet you still have to deal with the state level, so all the reservations throughout the country, and dealing with, like, say, Montana and North Dakota, both red states, and they it I mean, right now they're trying to get rid of the Indian Child Welfare Act, and they're
Absolutely.
trying to, get rid of language immersions in school, and so
And actually, I think they're going to succeed.
sure.
I actually
Yep.
think they're going to succeed. And
Hmm.
it's a shame, but it's just you got to figure who's pushing what and who has the power to push it. If they can push a pipeline, they can push this.
Sure.
Come, I mean, the pipeline was the hard one. Language is
Right.
easy.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's true. I know.
When it comes to now, first tell people what you do so people can contact you. I did put it in the link and stuff, but tell people what you do at the institute.
Sure. So what I do here in Washington, D.C. is, our tribe, the Ani and Lakota Nations. If you look on a map, the federal government calls us the Grovo and the Assiniboine. And so we are, a very, very poor tribe. We are 100% landowners of our reservation, and but we just don't have any social structure for economic development or any type of resources, to take care of ourselves. Say it that way. The enterprises, like, I work for one. It's called Buffalo Horse Incorporated, and what we do is we do business for the federal government. So much like any other small business, we have developed what other types of, like, services that we can provide to the federal government. There's always a procurement list that the government will put out for services that they need. And so, for example, like, our main area is security services. If you went into a federal building, and the guards that are there, or, like, the guys in the back of the office that do the background checks, that's what our teams do. So we're able to compete with other small businesses to win awards for that, and it's for profit. So what sets us apart from uh, other small businesses is I'm not in it for myself. I'm in it for our people.
Mm-hmm.
So all of our revenues that we make go right back to our tribe, and then we have what's called a community development financial institution set up. And so you don't have that black hole. And so when our money comes in, it goes first to the areas within our mission statement that are designed to help our people. We're going to help with the elder care services. We're going to help with the elder wellness, women and children programs, and then anything else that belongs, that needs a step up.
Because we know, you and I know, there's an addiction issue with the younger
Right?
generation. So
Yes.
that's something huge that
Correct.
we have to fix.
Absolutely. And so I'm glad you brought that up. So to expand on that, that's one area in our community, and you've seen it too, even in your time there. We have a lot of youth suicide.
Oh,
And you're right. There's substance abuse from a very, very young age. And it has to do with trauma that the parents and the parents are dealing with, that just keeps moving down. So our reservations, we only have to rely on the Indian Health Service. And the budgets for the Indian Health Service are very limited. And so it does not cover substance abuse. And so we're very rural, that we can't, an addiction counselor, or even putting somebody, having them go to treatment is not an option. And so some of the things that the Indian Health Service have been trying to do is, like, telehealth. And I mean, that doesn't work. You got to work hands on.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
our tribes have done a lot of getting with our spiritual leaders to engage the youth again, go back to that. But sometimes that doesn't really work. And so what we're trying to focus on as a whole, like the tribes as a whole, is maybe working towards building wellness centers that are right in our communities, because like on my reservation it's probably 60 miles by 60 miles, but you have a 45-mile gap between one community to the next
one, yeah.
Yep, and then our
store. When we talk about community, we're talking about stores, like literally like gas station to gas station, or like where you could buy foods and products. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so the health facility is an Indian Health Service hospital, and it's like a medic Band-Aid station. You go there and you'll wait all day, and then if they call you, they'll give you an aspirin and tell you, take it easy for the night. And if you have a critical illness like a substance abuse or an addiction, or even like our people, because we have a food sovereignty, like you just mentioned, I'm gonna use that term because diabetes, high blood pressure, things that are affecting our people from the not having our
proper
ancestral
diet.
foods,
right? Because you're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be eating this stuff.
Right.
We're not built for it. We wasn't meant for it.
Nope. And then like you just said, the stores that are there, they sell nothing but bags of potato chips and soda pop, and just there's no food. And so we don't even have a source of nutritional food. And you would have to drive 4 hours away from like my community to Billings, Montana, just to get to a market that had fresh food.
Well, and they say, well, isn't this the nation's problem? And I'm like, wait a minute. I think it's an allotment, because I think it's one of these. It's part of a big plan to keep killing you.
Correct.
I mean, it's just what it is. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's kind of like the crack in the 80s in the black communities, and the alcohol and the liquor stores. You have more liquor stores than you have schools in a community. You know what I mean? It's all part of like, well, we're just gonna let you guys keep killing yourselves, so this way we can kill you less.
Right.
Yep.
And one thing I really appreciated is recently, within the last year, with the pandemic kind of slowed things down, but Johns Hopkins University, they have a Native division that does research for what we're talking about. And they try to raise money for programs to help out in starting with the addiction services. That's that needs to be handled first. And so, but at any rate, I was really impressed because they were talking about food sovereignty once in the Navajo Nation. Some of the leaders came and gave a presentation, and what you just said there, the first thing that they did was a food tax. And so all of your non-enrolled businesses, the gas stations, the grocery stores, if they wanted to sell soda pop and chips, they had to pay a food tax. And then if the people wanted to buy it, it was a food tax as well. Right. And so that infuriated all the businesses, and they said, well, leave.
Yeah. Fine.
Right. And so they're doing an amazing job. So all the money that they raised from their food tax, then they turn around and apply it right back to the addiction services, youth centers, the elder wellness. I thought that's impressive.
That's impressive. That's pretty good. That's a way of saying, if you're gonna do this, we're gonna use it.
Right. Yes. And so they were just discussing that model, and what our tribes have been working on too during the pandemic. We did have set asides of money to help out, with the tribes, because the tribal government shut down.
Yes.
And we're, even though we want to be a sovereign nation, we don't have any resources, so we do have to rely on like the CARES Act money and such to help out. And so the company I work for, like you just mentioned, the other half of it is the economic arm to our tribe. And so what we've been doing is getting creative with like the USDA to have different grow sites. So they've been experimenting with greenhouses.
Okay.
Our area of the country is a high plains desert. So you go from maybe a few months of 100 plus degrees, and then you get down to 40, 50 below the remainder of the 8 months. Yeah. So they've been experimenting with different grow houses to have, fresh vegetables, and then also having hydro grow houses, throughout. And so we've been setting food banks or food storage, areas to grow the fresh food because it's just not available.
Well, it's kind of tough, also to grow good green food when all the oil fires are blazing everywhere. Exactly. So
yes, yeah. And then one of the other things that I'm impressed that they're doing is they have what's called a healthy heart program. So most of your tribes will set up a healthy heart program to deal with diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure. Well, at any rate, we're lucky to have our bison. So our tribe, we're one of there's like 12 tribes in the nation that will have work with the state and the federal governments. So the bison that come out of say Yellowstone Park, when they would come out of the park, the practice was just to shoot and kill them. And so now our people go and bring them back to our communities, and we have buffalo pastures, and then so we brought our brothers home, so to speak.
Right, because now you can protect them, because there are still a lot of people still trying to keep them, and they're just such amazing animals. If no one's ever had the ability to get up close to a bison, I'm telling you, they're magnificent. The way I love cows. I don't know. I have always had an affinity for cows, but the way a bison looks at you, it's like he knows something. There's something about those eyes, the way they look, that the snorts do different things, and that's just reading body language, but they know something, and it's pretty cool. They're pretty majestic. I do think they're majestic. So
yes. So what we do is we'll actually we our economic arm of our tribe put together like a mobile meat plant, and so we'll harvest the bison, and our cultural practices, we used every part of the bison. We never wasted anything. So we go back to that, in our immersion schools, and the kids, could, do whatever's needed to make goods from the rest of the body. The meat then goes to, we have our commodities distribution. So those that don't have daily food or whatever, can sign up to get rations of goods, and not from the government goods, not the spoiled stuff, but yeah, they could sign up for, we call it the commodities program. So those fresh meat boxes from that bison meat are redistributed back to our people, and then we do have like healthy heart programs, like if somebody's having a critical issue, and they needed to make a change in their lifestyle, or whatever's needed. Well, turns out that like the bison meat actually is almost a healing property for us, because it's our ancestral food, and so it does make a difference.
We're going to talk more offline. We're going to do this again, because I still think there's so much more to talk on the specific, because people are going to have these questions like, let's talk about some specifics, specifically why there's still not an agreement between the nation and a federal government. Like who's supposed to write this, and what bill is supposed to be passed? And that's the interior that you're talking about. That's supposed to. Right. But we need to talk more about that, because I think if it's literally the people on this side who are not part of the nation, how can they push their senators to start saying, ask the interior, so we can sign this, so we can push this through, and let's turn this into a law.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah. And it's time. It's definitely it's much needed. And then even I appreciate your gesture on that. But just like when you said, what do I do? There needs to be more people like myself from our tribes to take the extra step on behalf of our communities to get out here if we needed to survive in mainstream, then let's change it back, like you just
Right.
said, like the Navajo Nation, like, hey, you're gonna pay me if you want me to do that,
Do that, then now okay, now pay me.
right?
Well, thanks everyone for listening to Bridges Live. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. You're listening to Shawn Ironmaker. We will be back again, and we'll let you know. Please always listen, watch, share, like. But more importantly, I put the link of how you can get a hold of Mr. Shawn Ironmaker so you can support what they're doing, and then ask the question. Directly email them and call them and find out what can you do. I would say first, sit back and check yourself and say, how come I didn't know this? And after you get over that sadness, forgive yourself and get right into the game, because we need you. We need all of you. We need all of you. Thank you so much. Everyone have a blessed evening. Be blessed, be safe, and get involved and take action. Thank you.